Hey everybody, this is Stratagem, and today it's time for more speculation about the time between Friendship is Magic and MLP A New Generation. This is part 3 of an ongoing series that I'm working on, and there should be a link to the first part down in the description below, as well as in the top right corner of this video right now. The topic of today's video is which characters from Friendship is Magic might still be alive and thus might make an appearance in G5. Now there are 221 episodes of Friendship is Magic, as well as a movie and 2 specials, so we simply cannot cover every single character who ever appeared in the show. However, we don't have to, because before we get started, we're gonna make a few assumptions here to trim down the list significantly. The first assumption is about lifespan. This is never clarified in the show, but for simplicity's sake and since it's kind of implied, I'm going to assume that the ponies, as well as most of the other species, have roughly human lifespans, so around 80 years on average. Furthermore, I'm going to assume that Alicorns are magically immortal. And finally, we're gonna say that G5 takes place at least 1,000 years into the future. And that means that the vast majority of the characters have long since passed on. So there are only a few handfuls that we need to look at. And look at them we shall. Let's start off with a group of characters. And I'm gonna call this group Dragons. Because, well, they are dragons. This includes all of the younger dragon characters that we have met. Spike, Smolder, Ember, Garble and the other teenage bullies, so basically all the children, teenagers and young adults. Now, the dragons are the one species for whom I make an exception when it comes to lifespan. They most likely live a lot longer than any other species. In most fantasy settings, dragons live for centuries, sometimes even millennia, and judging from the sheer difference in size from, well, a young adult like Ember to an adult like Sludge to that thing here, yeah, it's probably gonna take a few centuries to get that big. So that means all the younger dragons could still be around. They probably look something like this by now, but hey, they definitely have a pretty good chance to still be alive, despite everything that happened. Now let's have a look at potentially long-lived or immortal characters, and what better to start with than with the villains. So let's go through all the major villains from the season premieres and finales. Starting with season 1 episode 1, we have Nightmare Moon. Well, this character is definitely no longer around. However, in part she might still be. Now in the very first episode of this series I mentioned that I assume that Celestia, Luna and Twilight have given up on their immortality and passed on. And in episode 2 I talked about how, well, magic gone, so immortality gone. So Princess Luna is definitely no longer around. And since Nightmare Moon is kinda the same character, yeah, she's no longer with us. However, what might still be around is the Nightmare. Now this is never confirmed or denied in the show, but in the comics we are introduced to creatures living on or in the moon, which are basically the Nightmare, which can corrupt other characters and turn them into their nightmare versions. This is where nightmare rarity comes from, for example. And that being or those beings might still exist. If, and that's important, if they were not on Equestria whilst magic was gone. If they stayed on the moon, and if the moon didn't have the whole magic is gone thing, then they could still exist. So Nightmare Moon? No. But the nightmare or nightmare creatures could exist. But once again, of course, their existence is not 100% canon. It's a popular fan theory, it appears in the official IDW comics, but not in the show's canon. And we all know the IDW comics are of questionable reliability when it comes to canon. So take that with a grain of salt. Next up is the season 1 finale, and the villain is Princess Celestia, kinda if you want. Not really, but it's a good way to bring her in, and yeah, I already mentioned it with Luna. I think Celestia is no longer around. Moving on. Next up is the Season 2 premiere, and Discord as our villain. Now Discord again has a roughly 50-50 chance to still be around, just like with the hypothetical nightmare creatures. The main question is, where was he when magic disappeared? If he was in his own home dimension, then that place was probably not affected by the loss of magic, so he could still be around. However, if he was on Equestria when magic faded, then, well, he was probably stuck there. And while we know that Discord can exist without magic, unlike the Windigos for example, it is unlikely that he would retain his immortality once he lost his magic. so really it all depends on where he was. However, alive or not, I don't think that we're gonna see Discord in G5. Having him return as a villain would be a repeat of Return of Harmony, and having him return as a good guy would cause all the narrative problems that he caused in G4, where they had to constantly make something up why he didn't just snap his fingers and solve the problem, or just completely ignore his existence like in the movie. Next up would be the Season 2 finale, and thus Queen Chrysalis. However, I want to group her with Tirek and Cozy Glow, so we're going to talk about her later, which means we're going to continue with the Season 3 premiere, and the villain there was King Sombra. Now, Sombra has been blown up in Season 3 Episode 2, and then he was brought back by Discord, and then he got blown up again. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he could be brought back. Again, this could go in multiple directions. If he was indeed destroyed in Season 9, then yeah, he won't make a return. But if he was just quote-unquote defeated and sent to the Shadow Realm or whatever, he might make a return. And Shadow Realm, that is not just a funny reference to terrible anime dubs. No, it is also a reference to, once again, the IDW comics. The IDW comics describe Sombra as not being an actual unicorn, or an actual pony for that matter, but as being an Umbran. Those are shadow spirits, creatures, who occasionally try to attack Equestria, and Sombra was created by them. Well, he is an Umbran kinda, but he was given a pony form to infiltrate and take over. So there is this possibility that whenever he gets killed in Equestria, he just gets sent back to, well, the Shadow Realm, from which he can be sent back, summoned again, or whatever magical shenanigans to bring him back. So Sombra, yeah, actually might have a pretty good chance of making a return. Again, I'm referencing the comics here. However, I think that nothing that is stated in the comics contradicts anything that we see in the show, so it would be very easy to just make the whole Umbran thing canon. And it would also explain why Sombra, despite being a full-grown adult, doesn't have a cutie mark. So there's that. On to the Season 3 finale, and the villain is Twilight. Kinda, sorta, not really, but I already talked about her in the first part, and yeah, she's no longer here. Moving on. Season 4 premiere doesn't have a villain. Well, it kinda has a villain, however, that's Discord, and we already talked about him. And the Season 4 finale has Tirek, whom I'll talk about at the very end, with Cozy Glow and Chrysalis. Season 5 also doesn't give us any villains. Yeah, we got Starlight. However, she is still a regular unicorn, so no dice. Same uneventfulness for Season 6. Once again, premiere doesn't have a villain. Finale has Chrysalis once again. So let's move on to Season 7. This one doesn't even have a premiere episode, so we'll have to make do with the villain in the finale, which is the Pony of Shadows. And, well, the Pony of Shadows as we know it has obviously been defeated and doesn't exist anymore. However, the shadow itself, the darkness that called to Stygian and transformed him into the Pony of Shadows, that essence was sent to Limbo. And we have no reason to believe that Limbo does no longer exist. It probably is still around, so a unicorn or some other spellcaster might actually open a portal to Limbo and release the shadow, which would then try to find another host and create a new Pony of Shadows. So, Pony of Shadows as we know it? No. The shadow? Possibly, and thus a new Pony of Shadows. Season 8, our first villain was Racism, and that guy was defeated in the New Generation movie, so moving on. Next up would be Cozy Glow. Okay, so before we start talking about Cozy Glow and the others, let's first have a look at Grogar. Now Grogar didn't actually appear in G4 as we know by now. Now the real Grogar was last seen when he was defeated by Gusty the Great, and that was in pre-Equestrian times, so really long ago. The fact he hasn't been seen for that long a time can mean one of three things. Option 1, he is hiding somewhere in the world, biding his time and planning, in which case he is most likely dead by now because, well, magic was gone, and I don't think that goats are naturally immortal. Now he might be a weird creature that is naturally immortal or long-lived like the dragons, but I wouldn't bet on it, so could be deceased. The other option is, well, he already was deceased. He didn't make a move during the entirety of G4, and he had a long time before G4 even started, but nothing. Maybe he's not actually biding his time, but rather lying 6 feet under. That again would mean that he won't appear in G5. And the last option is, he is biding his time, he is planning, but he's not in Equestria. he opened a portal and went to, I don't know, the Equestria Girls universe, because everything ends up there. And well, if he's in another world, then there's a chance that he survived and could make a return. But again, Grogar is a complete mystery. We know next to nothing about him or his whereabouts, so that could really go either way. Now let's finally talk about the trio infernale, the Legion of Doom, Tirek, Cozy Glow, and Chrysalis. Well. Now the reason I wanted to talk about them as a group is because there is one thing we don't know, but we need to know in order to make any speculations, and that is when they were turned to stone. How exactly does that spell work? And I mean on a very mechanical rule level here. Basically there is two major ways how the spell could work. It could be a permanent effect, or it could be an instantaneous effect. Now for those of you who don't play pen and paper role-playing games, a permanent effect is an effect that, well, is permanent, however it requires magic energy to be maintained. There's usually some form of cost associated with it, be it permanent mana that you use up, be it that it's a high-level spell, be it costly material components, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it is an active working spell, which means the spell can be suppressed by an anti-magic field. And the anti-magic field is pretty much what happened to all of Equestria. So if it's a permanent effect that can just be suppressed, then the moment that magic disappeared, these three came back to life. Which means that Cozy Glow is at this point long dead, because she's still just a normal, regular Pegasus, and magic has been gone for how long? Probably over a century, so I don't think that Cozy Glow is still alive. A similar thing goes for Chrysalis. We don't know how long changelings live. I'm just gonna assume they have similar lifespans to ponies, which for her also means that she's most likely dead in this scenario. Tirek, well, we know that he has been around for a really long time, so possibly immortal, but also possibly magically immortal. So without magic, yeah, he probably wasn't around for too long. Also remember that he was in his very weakened state, so he has a small chance of being around if he's not a magic immortal but a regular immortal. However, I doubt that. So if the petrification spell is a permanent effect, they have all been released and have then passed on after the end of their regular lifespans. The other option is that the spell is not permanent but rather instantaneous. Instantaneous means you only use the magic energy once, the spell does something, and then things are the way they are. This is, for example, most damaging or healing spells. You can't just use an anti-magic field and say, oh, then the fireball didn't work and you get the hit points back. No, that's not how it works. I hope this explanation makes somewhat sense. Anyways, if the petrification spell actually works like that, then it means that, well, these three are still a statue standing around somewhere. So unless the statue got destroyed, they are still, well, alive, so to speak. They're still petrified and we don't know if they are perceiving anything or if they are just in a dreamless slumber for eternity. We don't know. However, what we can definitely say is that they are not active. They are either a statue or dead. Nothing in between. So we're not gonna see Tirek or Chrysalis running around and causing chaos. And that's it for the villains. Do we have any other characters that we need to talk about? Yes, we have two. And these two are the Alicorns that I haven't mentioned yet, Cadance and Flurry Heart. Let's start with the quote-unquote easy one. Cadance probably passed on. Like I said in the first video, I assume that Celestia, Luna, Twilight gave up on their immortality and passed on, and I assume that Cadance probably did the same. Mostly for similar reasons as Twilight, with shining armor, long dead. She doesn't have that much more reason to go on. There is still Flurry Heart, which could be a reason for her to persist, but who knows? Well, I know, because as I said, the assumption is that Alicorns are magically immortal, and well, there was a long time frame in which there was no magic. So even if she stuck around, she has lost her immortality, or had temporarily lost her immortality at some point, and thus has died by now. So you might assume that the same would be true for Flurry Heart, and on first glance you would be correct. But on second glance, Flurry Heart is different. She's the only born Alicorn, and we have no idea what this means. Does this mean she's basically a fake Alicorn who just looks the part but doesn't have any attributes like immortality, or really powerful magic and flight. We have seen her being a strong spellcaster as a baby, but then again, Pumpkin Cake was also a pretty competent spellcaster as a kid, and it is said that power fluctuations are normal. Yeah, she seems to be especially strong, but then again, both her parents are spellcasters, one an Alicorn, the other a pretty competent unicorn mage. We have seen Shining Armor do the magic shield bubble in Canterlot Wedding, which is something that only he could cast, so Flurry Heart definitely has good genes for magic. So that needn't be actual Alicorn strength. Maybe it's just normal unicorn power fluctuations, just on a very high level. That is one option. In that case, however, she was never immortal to begin with and passed on long ago. The other option, and that is the one that I'm going to go with, is that she is way more of a true Alicorn than the others were. That she is actually inherently immortal, like elves in many fantasy settings, for example. And that's what I want to go for. Flurry Heart is still alive, sitting in some remote corner of Equestria, plotting her, well, whatever she's plotting. We don't really know anything about her character. Maybe she has gone into exile after everything went to hell and she couldn't stop it. Or maybe she did something to cause all these problems, to cause rift between the ponies and thus the disappearance of magic. Maybe she's in exile because she blames herself. Maybe she became a supervillain who wants to take over Equestria and is just biding her time until magic returns. Who knows? However, of all the Alicorns, Flurry might actually have the best chances to still be alive, because her immortality might actually be, well, natural. Natural to her, that is, not caused by magic. At least, that's what I'm going with here, however unlikely it may be. And there we have it. Yeah, that is a lot of dead characters. Doesn't seem like we'll get to see a lot of familiar faces in G5. Well, this was definitely the longest video in the series so far, so I'm just gonna end it here. As usual, leave your theories, comments, ideas, whether you agree or disagree, down in the comments below. While you're down there, leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't done so already. You can also follow me on Twitter, DeviantArt and Patreon. And for the next video, well, I'm not sure yet. There are a few things I want to touch on, but I'm not really sure. There are no concrete plans right now, so I don't know what the future holds, but there might be a part 4 of this series. We'll see. Anyways, that's it from me for now. As always, I have been Stratagem. Thanks for watching, and see ya next time.